Hi, everybody. So today's session is Luke, who is normally the moderator and manages all this. Today, we're actually going to get him to present. And the topic today is my requirement specification, all facing the same direction. Everybody knows Luke. I'm not sure if he needs much introduction here, but as we know, Luke is the go-to person when it comes to test-driven development. And he's done a lot with that, and I think it's developing something great. Now, firstly, if you just ask everyone, make sure your mic is muted. If you have questions, it's very important. Please put them into the question and answer field. I will make an effort to answer them if they are questions that don't specifically relate to the topic. If they relate to the topic, I'll put the questions together, and at the end, we'll have a Q&A session where Luke will answer them. Any questions which are specifically relevant to what he's saying at the time, I will interrupt him and get him to answer them straight away if it's something that needs to stop. So please put your questions in there. I'll pick them up. We've also, please understand that there are a lot of webinars. We have quite a history. There are some old ones that have got information, and we're building up new ones. So we're, I think, getting back into the 2-week cycle. We should be seeing quite a lot going on. They're all on YouTube. The link you can find there, which is at CL Areopa Webinars. You should be able to find that on YouTube. And also we have the newsletter. If you sign up to the newsletter, you'll get a reminder of each new session with a calendar, so you can put in your calendar to join them. And any that are up and coming, look into the Areopa Academy website. You'll find all the information coming there. The next 2 webinars we have: Unleash Extensions Possibilities by Interacting with Other Extensions by David Feldhoff, and the 1st of December. The other one is Creating a Custom BC Connector for Power Automate by Joshua Anglisi in December the 15th. So I hope to see you at those 2 sessions. Remember that we're always looking for new topics. If you've got a topic you'd like to present, contact Luke, put it together. It's a great way to get started. It's a small, focused audience here. It's not a general seminar with millions of people. It's a nice, quiet audience you can talk to, interact with, get some practice, get your name out there and get famous. As always, of course, we want to make very special thanks to 4NAV. They're the ones that make all of this possible, and without them we wouldn't actually have this session. So thank you very much to 4NAV. And for those of you who don't know about 4NAV, really, if you're doing reporting in Navision, I think everybody in BC is doing reporting, you need to find 4NAV. So with that, let's hand over to Luke. Luke, I will make you presenter.
Thanks for the introduction, David. Thanks for being the moderator. Today I want to talk about requirement specification. Of course, I will go through a number of slides, but as a short introduction, like David said, I'm into testing, test-driven development. And what I'm showing today is related to that. I'm trying to improve the processes I'm involved with to make things as, let's say, as closely fitting into each other, so everything becomes more efficient than ever before. And that's what I will be discussing with respect to requirement specifications today. A short introduction, or a short continuation on the introduction. This is what I've been working on and looking at for the last years. Yes, of course, requirement specifications have been around for a long time, let's say all my professional life, but related to the mode we are moving into of having requirements, getting them implemented, getting them tested, and getting them out in the world, and finding out actually that this cycle has to become shorter and shorter due to Microsoft pressing us into a monthly update if you go to the cloud, for sure, and even before you could have done that, but also our customers are expecting that, and technology enables us to do that. If you go out to the world with your solution with a lot of bugs in it, you cannot afford that anymore. But that's what this is all about. So I want to share my thoughts on how we could get phased in much as possible, or as much as possible, into the same direction. And yes, trigger all of us to discuss this and improve our practices. So feel free to step in with questions now, but also later. This is my story now, and yes, this is what it is so far. Short introduction, if you haven't come across me, those relate to most part of my professional life. I'm not the youngest anymore. I'm happily married with a nice couple of children and a very lovely wife. She's here in the kitchen, by the way, so I need to say that anyway. I've been around in this world for quite some while, working at Microsoft as a tester. Actually, in that, let's say, part of my life, I was well known of being a harsh reviewer on requirements anyway. So that relates also to the story of today. Of course, my book and requirements are also part of that. So it is, testing is something that relates to requirement, or actually, as I want to pose to everybody, requirements should be tested, and that's what the story is about today. If you want to contact me, feel free to do that on Twitter or the email or through the Areopa channel or whatever you want to use. Yeah. So the agenda. I will start with a problem statement. Why do I want to discuss this? Why do I think things are not well shaped or not shaped in the best way as I think they could be? What is the challenge we have then if we want to solve that that problem actually? And what is the solution then? And I'll show an example, and in the end there will be Q&A, but feel free to pose your questions like David already suggested, so you can step in if it relates to what I'm talking about. So the problem statement. What is the problem? The problem is that requirement specifications are most often conceptual descriptions. Yeah? Conceptual descriptions of what a customer wishes to do. This is what I want to do. If I open up a screen, maybe that's not even that detailed, but I would like to achieve this and this and this, whatever. It's a story. It's a fairy tale, I always say. That leads to the fact that with fairy tales also, we all have been young. We all have been a child listening to stories, and that story starts to, well, trigger things in our imagination, in our mind, and everyone makes up their own image of it. Although you could be surprised how much those images resemble, but nevertheless, there is an interpretation. Yeah, and we all know that if you start to interpret something, things are left out depending on your background, on your youth, on your education, on the mood of the day, on your focus you can have in general. Things will get out. You all know that game of sitting in a circle next to each other, and somebody tells into the ears of the neighboring person a story or a small riddle, and then it has to go through this circle, and then it returns actually through the other side, and the story is totally different. Yeah. So this also applies to requirements, to user stories, to scenarios, to whatever we write down as a prosaic thing. So in this sequence, from requirement specifications to app coding to testing, if you take the waterfall way more or less, you start with requirements and then finished, you start with app coding, and then finished, you start with testing. Yeah, this is what typically happens. I think we all know this image or versions of this. And yes, things get lost. And that's one of the major things that we all ran into, and which actually burdens our customers, ourselves too, but our customers, with things that go live with a lot of things still to be fixed. And in the traditional Microsoft, the traditional Navision implementation projects, it often happens that we have to fix a lot of bugs, too many bugs, let's put it that way, after go live, which is a cost, because often it's not part of the contract, and who's going to pay? The implementer. Maybe there's some, I don't know, some fight at court eventually to find out who is going to pay for what. Nevertheless, it's a waste of energy. What we need to strive for is that this should be as minimal as possible. Let's say those changes to those trees, even disappearing trees, should be minimal. Yeah. So that's what I want to talk about and what I want to suggest a solution for, at least how I think and how I've experienced to improve things on this. The overall problem is also related, or the problem is related to the overall situation we are moving into, from an on-premise world into a cloud world, from a low update frequency world to a high update frequency world. We will have less and lesser time to, let's say, rework things. If you're on the AppSource and your app is going to be used by you don't know who, and it's difficult to implement, to get it working, let's put it that way, not implement, but get it working. If it's badly tested before and they run into bugs, they will just uninstall it and never use it again. You're lost. You lose the game if you don't change your practices. And well, that relates to your requirements. We cannot afford to lose as much as time as before in this whole sequence, in getting from a customer wish through requirements, through app coding, through testing into something published on the AppSource. So we have to be more efficient, and I think this is part of it. We have to deliver better quality. How do we do that? So I already mentioned it, but explicitly, there is no room, or let's put it a little bit more gentle, there's lesser room for after go live failures. So that's the problem statement, in my opinion. The challenge, our challenge, is how to get from that concept to software feature without losing details. So there will be a concept. So there will be an idea of this is what we need. There's a customer wish, and there will be a story. And storyboarding is part of that. There are different disciplines that help us to get that story clear. But eventually, having a story is not enough to start programming. We need to get it into a different shape. And this is, let's say, my solution. I found this picture when I was preparing this for directions. This is one of the covers of a long, an LP, a long play record. It is of a Dutch band of the 70s. You can see it from the, what do you call, the font type, but also if you see the long hair of the people here. Yeah, this is a typical Dutch channel. I don't know exactly where. It doesn't have to be. I don't think this is Amsterdam anyway. But from the rest, it's probably hard to see that this is in the 70s. The solution, as said, in the sequence from requirements through app coding to testing, interpretations are made. I'll get back later, but I think app coding and testing already starts in the requirements. Yes, I think that's maybe probably an open door, but testers and developers, actually everybody involved in a project, in a product, in the next phase for the product is part of the requirement specifications, is responsible for that. Things tend to get lost, yes? And if we take the sequence as this schema on the right, you might turn this upside down. What happens if we turn this upside down? Of course, this is what happens, but as a concept, think about the end of the chain, or position yourself at the end of this chain, testing. What is software testing about? And that's, let's say, one of my hobbies in this world, and it's something what I really like, also something what I really dread once in a while, because especially if you have to do some things manually and you have to do it again, it hasn't been automated, it's becoming a nuisance. What is software testing about? I think that's a very relevant question, because this leads to the fact that that is part of the solution. First, you could say we have specifications, and when we are testing, we want to verify the specifications. Okay, great, that's clear. What are specifications about in the end? Specifications in the end are about, well, actually, you could put it differently. Specifications lead to a software package, a feature. And what is a software package? It's nothing more than behavior. We let the system behave in a certain way. which means there are different ways of behavior. Of course, it's a collection of behaviors, you could say. So specifications are about new behavior. Yeah? It could be a bug, so we need to change the behavior. Nevertheless, it's about behavior. So testing is verifying the behavior, the new behavior of the software against the specifications, of course. It relates to the specifications. Now, if we convert requirement specifications from a conceptual description into a behavioral description, we see that the requirements, the wish of the customer, and the way we can verify and implement it becomes closer. If I tell you I need to have a feature that allows me to set up this and this and this, that's a nice description. You might say, I understand you. But then you're going to implement it, and I get it back and I tell you, but that's not what I meant. If I describe you what it needs to, how it needs to act, how it needs to behave, the chances are much bigger, and I think they are quite big, that you will implement, I will implement the thing that I've been asking for. Yeah? So we have to look at it from a behavioral perspective. Yeah? And this will allow both testers and developers, this was a bit too fast, to do their work straightforward as possible. Yes, I've forgotten to remove a nice animation here. And I think I found out, and that's as so far, these are my personal favorites, using flowcharts and ATD test definitions bring this much closer to each other. The requirements described as flowcharts and ATD test definitions, test scenarios, brings it closer to me as a developer or me as a tester, what I'm needing to implement or verify. Yeah? Implement as a developer, verify as a tester. And let me now just talk as a manual tester. Yeah, but it relates to automated testing also, and we get to that later. But let me not switch between the two all the time. Yeah, so we need to bring those things closer to each other. And I would like to show you that in an example. So I think flowcharts is not something new. I think test definitions, maybe not that new, but for most of us, at least that's my experience, that's quite new. And yes, often the feeling comes around, do I need to describe my requirements in the full extent of the behavior? A in, B out, C in, D out, minus Z, X, X, S, whatever. And if I do this, I need to get an error? Actually, yes. If you don't, what happens? There are holes. There are interpretations which also have holes or create holes. Then in the end, you find yourself reworking because it was not complete. I'm not saying that everything is needed to be detailed out at the front of the process or at the front of a sprint. Let's say the old-fashioned waterfall way, that you had a long period for requirements gathering and specifications and reviewing, and okay, then everybody, bang, everybody could go and implement, and then code ready, everything could be tested. No, no, no. You can still do it the agile way in chunks. Define what the different atomic parts are and start detailing them out in test scripts. Yeah. So let's get to the example. I would like to introduce this example, and I would like to show you a couple of things too, which allows you to get better understanding of what I'm talking about, and maybe also allows you easier to step in with questions if you want. This business case is one that is a real life case. This is something we implemented in the company. The learning network I have been working at for 7.5 years till last August. Typically, this is about changing the posting period in the GL setup and or the user setup every month in that company after a month closing has been done. And that was a manual process. A company where in high season, 180 users were using Business Central, or actually NAV 2018 at that time. Not all of them needed to have something specifically set up in the user setup, but quite a number of them. There was a manual process. Every end of the month, somebody needed to do this. And yes, error prone, of course. In general, it went quite well. But of course, you could forget to change a specific user setup, or somebody would totally forget about it. And then next month, with still the setting of the previous month, starting the next month, we would not be able to post anything. Yeah. So the current situation was that what I just described, at the start of each month, settings are manually changed in the general ledger setup, in the user setup for specific persons. If you change it here, is for, let's say, everybody who hasn't a specific user setup. There are users in the user setup that should still be allowed to post in the previous month, or maybe even a longer period before the current month. But most of the users, either through this general setting or through their user setup, should only be allowed to do the setup in the current month. Yes, so as you can see, we're still in this month. This applies to most of the people working in the system right now. Yeah, this takes time, and as said, it's error prone. So we wanted to automate it. So that's the desired situation, that we have an automated process that will change by means of a badge job those dates. And yes, for specific persons, we could make a kind of exclusion that for those persons, the periods would not be changed, so they could continue to work with the periods that were set up for them. Yeah, so a simple feature. And yes, it is simple, of course. I can take a complex one right now and we'd never end before the next hour. But this is just as a simple example to show you what I mean with getting specification described in a behavioral manner. This is what I called a conceptual description. Yes, it's clear also from the heading, but this describes the concept. It doesn't tell me how things should act, how they really relate to each other. This is not rocket science, I do understand, but still you would be surprised if 4 or 5 people would sit down to program this, how differently it could be. And then hopefully they still do the same job, but might also be once you're going to test it well, to find out that there are some things not working right, going wrong, whatever. Yeah. So going to a behavioral description starts for me mostly with a flowchart. So I want to understand the flow. Actually, when it wouldn't be there and I would start programming, I would start programming this batch report, probably in a report. Could also decide to put it in a code unit, but I would start to write what I call my story. I would start more or less to write a kind of flowchart. If I do this, and next thing, what I need to do is this. And yes, is there a decision to be made, etc., etc., to get a clear understanding. And then I can also, and that's one of the things, it's not only about detailing it out for me, it's detailing out for the whole team. Now we have something we can discuss on. Hey, look, you have put here this condition, use next period, but maybe somebody has a question. Isn't there a third option? You only have 2 options, isn't there? You start to see more things than just from the conceptual description. This has become a form, a platform to discuss things much better on than just having a story. So this is one. Flowcharts are clear. Of course, there could be errors, but that's what you will find out more easily. Yeah? They define the clear steps to be covered by the code. If I, in this case, if I start, the user activates the batch report, something needs to be done. Yeah, okay. As said, it's better to review and thus identify holes in this flow, much easier. Yeah? If I've been a high school teacher and so many of those students would say, when I ask them, where's your homework? I don't see anything on paper, and they would point to their head. It's in my mind. Oh, great, it's in your mind, but I don't see it. I cannot argue with you about it. Yeah, but I can tell you. Okay, tell me. And then they start talking, and then all of a sudden they find out, hey, I've forgotten something, and then they're going to fill in that hole. By asking them to tell it, they find out they have holes in their thoughts. Your brain is a powerful instrument, but it's also a very weak one. For many of us, there are bright girls and guys. Yes, I know. I won't say I have a muddy mind, but I don't have a real big bright mind. I know. So I put it down. Disadvantage, of course, it can become complex. True. It can be too technical for some. However, this shows clearly that it's complex if it's complex, and that you need to cut it down into simpler parts. That's often one of the first things that show. If it becomes too complex, you haven't split it up into small, real atomic parts that cannot be cut up anymore. Nevertheless, if it's complex, it also shows you up ahead already that testing needs to be done more rigorously than you ever thought up front. Yeah, so the disadvantage is not such a disadvantage, it's showing you a lot. The behavioral description, the flow chart. Next to that, I want to have test descriptions. Actually, this is that flow chart is, yes, in some way the behavioral description, although it doesn't exactly tell me upfront A in, B out. I don't see an exact relation between the input and the output. Yes, I can follow the flow chart, but it doesn't tell me that if I put A in, B should be coming out. Tests do. Yeah, ATDD scenarios. Those who have been following me know that I use this format, but there are other ones. It's called, for example, there's one called for phase testing. ATDD says given when then. For phase format says set up, exercise, verify, and clean up, an extra phase at the end. There is also, I don't know the official name for it, 3 A's, arrange, act, and assert, but they all boil down to the same thing. You need to set up the system, you need to exercise your action, and you need to verify the outcome, always. Well, ATDD scenarios do cover that too. They have an explicit definition of scenarios. Yeah. So in this case, this is a first stage of my ATDD. I define features where I, in this case, need to test something on the request page of my batch job. I need to verify what happens with my GL setup, and I need to verify what happens with my user setup. Yeah. And in that, to verify, I did identify for the request page 3 tests. We implemented it, we discussed this, there were no more, but probably you might find more. I mean, we're not perfect, we're not, well, the Holy Father, or whatever you want to call. There will be always holes in it. In this case, you will see that the numbering is consecutively following each other. But often in my sheet, you will find a higher number here because I found out there was a hole here. I'll probably hear that. Then I'll give this a higher number to make clear, yes, I did find out that I had a hole. And there's no reason why this should be consecutively numbered. Why? No reason. It just needs to have a unique number to point to it. It's scenario 2. That's easier than saying set starting date and ending date for next period. 2, no discussion. Yeah? So this is the first level, defining the scenarios, and then we need to later detail it out. But this is something that could already be, and I think should already be, in the requirements. Maybe not the details, but this is typically what needs to be tested. ATDD scenarios. Yeah? Advantage, clear description of the behavior, and also clear description, if they're completed with details, a clear description for the developer, for the tester, for the developer that will write the test automation to do their testing part. Yeah, as a developer, you need to do some testing. You're not always aware of the different variations. Maybe you will not always fully test that, but later with test automation, we'll implement it. And this will clearly describe what is needed. It's directly applicable, as I said, in a different way to app coding and test coding. Yes, and it's in sync with app coding. Yes, you need eventually to program this and incorporate this into your tests as comments. I'll show you later. Yeah, there is still a part that is based upon or is safeguarded by discipline. Those of you who have used maybe or seen some presentation of me using a PowerShell module, and I will show it shortly today too. I'm trying to build some tools that makes the process from this into test coding much shorter, much securer, much more structured. Disadvantage, of course, here also, it can become quite complex with a high number of scenarios. Yes, true, but that means that there is quite a lot of things to be tested. That means that we have identified that the user or that the system, that the user can use, but that the system can have quite a big extent of behavior. Yeah? So this can be quite big to maintain. But yeah, that's the case with testing in general. And yes, if you don't detail it out well enough, you find yourself in troubles later, because you will need to start fixing bugs. Yeah. So I don't know if there are questions so far, David?
No questions so far.
Okay, clear. Then probably I'm as we say in the Netherlands, I'm preaching for my own community. I don't know, but maybe it's that clear. The example. I'm going to demo this, but let me first show you this. I've been building up a GitHub repository. Let me go to this level with test automation examples. I haven't done a lot on it recently. This is mainly from before last, well, our summer. And I did build 3 examples, and one of them is this one. They all have a flowchart. They all have an issue here with a conceptual description, and there's for all of them code related to it. Yeah. Our example of today, that's this one. Yeah, this is the flowchart, and yes, there is in this repository also code for each of the examples. Let me open up feel free to go there, feel free to use it, feel free to provide me with feedback. If you have issues, report them here. So you will find there is at this code level here, there's a folder VS Code C side. For one example, I also did work out the CAL version. The other 2 are only as VS Code examples, and you will find for both of them an app and a test folder. For our example, this is not our example, so the automatically setting posting period, I have opened up in Visual Studio Code the app and the test app. Yes, eventually with apps you will have a separate test app, although while developing you might have it in the same one. But eventually I split them up. If you are going to publish to or want to get it published to AppSource, Microsoft asks you to provide a separate app, a depending app that contains the test. In short, by the way, what was the implementation? Well, I added a field to the user setup that is called automatic update posting period that allows for the user, that sets up the user so that this batch jobs can change the user settings so the posting period is updated to the current, or let's say if it's at the end of the month, the next posting period. This field is also positioned on that page. Yeah. And this, here, and this is the report. I'm not going to step into details. I'm going to show my Visual Studio Code project for my tests. So what you'll find out is that you could recall from the slide that I have 3 features, and each feature for me always at least ends up into one code unit. Could be multiple. There is some rule of thumb: don't put more than 25, 50 tests in one code unit because they become sticky. The more you put in, the longer it takes per test in the code unit. So you might want to split off if you have too many tests. In my case, it's not that big. By the way, I will jump into this part later, but let me open up the Excel sheet that goes with it. That's this one. It's opening on the other screen, so let's move it here. This is in the end, with all details, my ATDD Excel sheet, yeah, with altogether 10 tests, yeah, 3 in the first, 2 in the second, and 5 in the other one, and they all end up here in those different code units. Yeah. So let me show you first of all from the app what actually has been added. There is, I'm using Cronus. With testing, I'm always using Cronus. Preferably, I have an empty one, but some things where I relate to standard are making use of some things in Cronus. There is no users being set up in Cronus, so, but as you can see, I have this column added due to my extension. Yeah, I could run the report. I'm not going to do that. For test automation, I can go to the AL test tool. I already set it up for this session, and you can see that all my tests, my 10 tests, are in this one, and I already ran them, so it was successful. I'm not going to discuss test automation. I teach classes on that, currently running at a Dutch company, starting in December for open registrations, and in January the next one. But I can run this and see that things are working, and then you have to trust me that I'm a professional enough and that I'm keen enough that they make sense, of course. However, what I do want to show you is that, first of all, the part here, oh no, sorry, of course, on this, yes, setting up this flowcharts and enabled me to, let's say, crystallize my thoughts on how the process should flow, and then enabling my developer. I didn't develop the code, by the way, for the app part, and also not for the test part. I designed this solution, and I designed the tests, the ATDD test scenarios, and another person, a colleague at that time, here you find his name, Peter Konijn, did implement it, which is perfectly right that a developer develops the app code and the test code, because it's clearly defined what those tests should entail. There's no discussion on having a developer testing his or her own code is a bad thing to do. Yes, if they do it manually, they know exactly what not to do, what exactly to do to show that it works and to evade errors. Yeah, but with this discipline or this way of working, it's any developer that should be able to write the test code. So what I would like to demo as a last part before I get to the conclusion is, you can see that, let's zoom in a little bit here. If you look at all the details here, you see clearly I have a feature level, here, this column. I have a scenario level. I have the given when then, the different steps the scenario should cover, given the data. When somebody does something or something is happening, then this is the result we should find. In this sheet, you can see that I have some macros programmed to create the tag the way they formatted in ATDD. And I have added a column where I create comments from it, but then I have an extra column which allows me here to pick this up, paste this into a PowerShell file, and have a PowerShell commandlet run on that more or less, or actually getting the results from that file, piping that in a commandlet, converting that into a test code unit. Yes. So given the fact that this is detailed out, I have quite a nice jump into test code already. Yeah. So I will show this. This is my app project. Let's take the GL setup, 2 scenarios. This is more or less a copy paste from this part here. Yeah. Paste. As you can see, well, I forgot a second scenario, by the way, but what I want to show, yeah, of course, is I need to take the whole. Oh, sorry, these are. Oh, sorry, this is the not the GL setup. That's why I was wondering. 2 scenarios for the GL setup. Yes, if I copy paste, it almost looks the same as this here. You see, I've reformatted a little bit to look nicer, and I can run a converter, and that's this one. By the way, feature scenario given. These are all PowerShell aliases for commandlets. That's part of the tool. And if I run this converter, and it will create a file with _2, so it will not overwrite. Yeah. It creates, for me, a test code unit. It's not ready because the implementation, which I think should always be encapsulated. It's not only me saying that. There are a lot of people, official projects, etc., also saying you should always encapsulate your code into what we call helper functions, and they only provide now an error, so I can run it and I see it errors, and then I fix this one, something else errors, and I gradually get into this thing working. It's not about demoing this thing, and yes, you might have seen it before, but what I wanted to show this is the simple fact that if we bring our requirements into a mode where we describe the behavior and do it in a test format, and I would advise you use the ATDD one because the tooling is there, and we're working on a next stage for the tooling that would allow you to import the Excel sheet and then get the first phase of your code or the first level of your code created. And later on, once finished, you could export it again into Excel if you would want to add new tests or update some of those criteria, add an extra verification or whatever. Yes, that allows you to make shorter steps without lesser interpretation from requirements into app and test coding. Yeah. No, I don't have a tool to change this one into an app code part. That would be a next one maybe. Haven't thought of that yet. We first want to finish the other one. So that's actually the demo. Yeah. Then as a conclusion, I think that's not only thinking, I think you will also find out, but I know in my case, the projects I've been in, that I get better detailed requirements. The nice thing is, I haven't mentioned that, but due to the fact that you start describing behavior, it's more clear that there are holes in it, and you will have better discussion with the product owner or the functional consultant, the persons that conceived the requirements with the key users, etc. Yeah. Also, agile-wise, yes, testers, developers get to discuss more details with product owners. It's really the case, and I'm always surprised that it every time happens again. And we're improving, and then still, and we're improving also the requirements, the new requirements, but then still we have much more meaningful discussions due to this. ATDD scripting allows us as a team to review the tests. Okay, you say this is the way it behaves. Are you not missing something, or is it overdoing, or whatever? And for me, as I more or less posed before, requirements, testing, development is everything, documentation, deployment. Well, maybe not the deployment, but everything before the deployment, the eventual deployment is responsibility of the whole team. If the code is fucked up, it's not a finger pointing to we often do, to the developer, it should be a finger pointing to us, the team. Most probably, it's most often the case that a bug in the system is due to some omission in the requirements, or you could say maybe the requirements are okay. It could be a bug inserted by the developer, but it could also be that it goes live and the testing was done badly. I like, you have this saying, if you have a finger pointing to somebody else, 3 are pointing to you. And that's how I always want it to be. In the end, you will find that your solution will have better quality, lesser bugs. Yes, testers also, the manual one, once you have your things automated, can do better testing, can really start breaking the thing. They don't need to rerun all those things they've done before and probably still works. They get annoyed by it. They lose focus. Make sure they get to put the focus on the real things. Yeah? And yes, if you have the test already defined and maybe already programmed, because that's also possible, and that's what I actually showed you already, a big part of your tests with running this one, I'm sorry, the converter, running this one, it's not ready, but a big part is already there, and you can already start even programming, even if you don't have programmed everything yet in the app, which means that your test will fail. Yeah. So, and once you have your test and app code, the developer can already check things. And when they're going to update something, add something to a feature, they have the alt test available to verify that it's still working. Yeah. So I'm getting to the end. One thing as a last one before, let's say the QA part is coming around, is this book. And my directions, when I was preparing my directions presentation, which is mainly what I've been telling now, but now I gave more details because we have a little bit more time. I was pointed to this book by, let's say, I didn't know her. I got in contact, I don't know through what, but I was searching for something, a Dutch well, functional consultant, product owner, and she pointed me to this book. I asked her, so how about agile in your case and getting tests into the specification? Because in many of the things I've been reading so far, didn't get across that well. And yes, I knew about this book, but I never read it, and the title didn't hint me enough at that time. But actually what this is telling, specification by example, is specification by test example, test definition. The guy, Gojko Acik, I guess it pronounced a bit like this, comes up with a kind of, let's say, general new terminology, not talking about tests or test-driven development or ATDD test scenarios or whatever, but talking about examples. Actually, also in this book, I wasn't aware up front, of course, hadn't read it, but it's more or less exactly describing in his words what I'm telling right now here, even though I hadn't read it yet. Specifications are go through different phases. You got the concept, then you get into specifying the examples, showing how it should be acting. And yes, later on, maybe detailing it out in more examples, because it's clear that this example is a generic one, but we have some specific ones. For example, boundaries. If you have a discount percentage field, you need often to test -1, 0, 1. 99, 100, 101. Yeah, so the example could be test this input, and you could conclude from that you might need a couple of variations for that. Yeah. This is, I think, as you can see, bolded it, a must-read for all of us. It's based upon a research in over 50 projects 10 years ago, about that time, or maybe a bit longer. 50 projects by 30 different companies, and they all, well, no, not all lead to exactly the same, but to a lot of things that are the same. What makes, as the subtitles say, teams, successful teams, deliver the right software, not the software right, but the right software. That's what is asked for and what is needed. I'm at the end of my story, the Q&A. And before I forget to say so, thanks for being in this session. David, any questions? Oh, I don't hear your voice.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, technical issues today. It's not going great, is it?
Yeah. Well,
no questions today. Assuming that people aren't typing questions and they're just not coming up on GoToMeeting, but no, I don't think so. Does anyone listening have any questions? Any hands up? Doesn't look like it. Yeah, we do. Fantastic presentation from Steve Endow. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah. I'll just, while we're waiting if anyone's going to ask any questions, I'll just add a few things. I started developing some test-driven development in the DOS version of Navision, where I did scripts where I basically had small batch jobs that would populate journals. The users would define what would go in there, and we put them into a file and populate them and do automated testing. And it's an old thing, but it never really caught on with Navision, and it really has to. It's really critical, and we've just ignored it for so long. Steve's also saying I just purchased specification by example. So thanks for the recommendation on that one.
Yeah, it is. It's really worthwhile. It is containing a lot of examples of how this team has solved that issue to get closer, to bring things closer to each other. It is not giving examples in the case of code or whatever. It's describing the processes on how things have been handled. So it's not a technical book. This is a must read and a possible read for everybody, including key users. Mm-hmm. It's not. It's. I would say my grandmother could even read this.
Okay. I think the hardest part is not so much from the user point of view. I always find it's from the partners and the developers, getting them to understand how costs work. Because obviously in Navision days, we just wrote code and sold it, and that was it. And I remember working for a partner once who were having financial problems, and I did the math, and we went through and added up all of their projects, and we looked at the average, if we looked at the average quote that was going out to a customer, we were putting between 40 to 50% of the project was for development. If we looked at our overall time usages of what people in the company were doing, a typical project took between 5 to 15% of the project cost was development. 15% was for a small project and 5% for a big one. So these big projects, less than 5% or maybe 5-6% of the time was actually spent development. Now, when you look at billing, it's a completely different number. And so if we look at these projects where we were saying, oh, it was so fast and cheap and simple to develop in Navision, really what was happening is we were just giving away free work because we never budgeted for testing, never budgeted for automated testing processes and everything else that was come with BC. All we were doing is giving money away. We were doing it for free. We were doing it. We just didn't know. So I really like doing things backwards. Let's say for years we've been doing things backwards, and I like the way you're approaching this is we have to do it the right way, which is testing is the first thing we do, not the last thing.
Yeah, true.
So Eustace said, sorry, yeah, keep going.
Yeah, one of the things I started with, that we move from an on-prem to cloud situation with shorter cycles. We cannot afford ourselves anymore. I mean, we have been doing a good business in general, making money on one way, we're still in business, so apparently we're doing not a bad job at all. So customers are happy what they're using, even though they maybe clung to it through whatever. But if it was really bad, we wouldn't have been in business. But I think we could have done already better 10 years ago. But nevertheless, at this moment, we need to improve ourselves to stay in business because we don't have time anymore for longer parts where we say, well, let's just postpone the publishing of our go live because we need to do some better testing. No, it needs to go live with the next update of Microsoft.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the important thing, is that we just, things that we didn't do before because we could get away with it, we can't get away with it anymore. And actually, it's going to benefit everybody, because if we're budgeting from the beginning that testing is the first and most important step of the process, then we budget it. We will budget our costs, and we will look, if we get this testing done now with the automated processes, it's still going to be selling this testing that we've invested in. We'll still be selling it for 3 years on an ongoing, recurring basis. So it isn't lost money. And if I look at Eustace just asked a good question, and his question is, my question is, how much technical knowledge the person drawing the behavioral description should have, and the same for testing scripts to fit the development as close as possible. And I think that's really good, because this is the issue, is that understanding what do we need to do and what do we get in there. We need to do what we should be doing a long time ago. So just in case that question wasn't clear, basically.
The question was clear to me.
Good. Okay. Answer it.
In short, my flowcharts also tend to be user-oriented, so not technically. Of course, there will be technical parts in it if I need to, but in that sense, I don't think somebody should be technical to draw that. I mean, the process, you need to know the application, of course. And in this example, you need to realize that if you have you need to set something on the GL setup, you need to set something on the user setup, but that can be drawn by a non-technical person. Of course, they need to know how to go about with flowcharts. For the tests definitions, that's, in my opinion, for us at this moment, always functional. Of course, unit tests should be part in the end also, part of development, but that's not part of requirements. That's the work of a developer. Yeah, so the tests which I'm talking about, have been talking about today, are functional tests. They're describing the behavior of the system that is going to be created. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know what happened here. Oh, you're changing this one. Yes.
Yep. We're out of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah,
we're out of time. We've got through all the questions. I think it's a great thing. You just said thanks for the explanation. So thank you, everybody. Just remember, go to YouTube. You'll find the recordings. Log up to the newsletter, because it's just so much easier. You'll get everything. Put it in your calendar like I do. I put them all in my calendar. And the day before I see it, if I've got time, I join in and just put them in your calendar. And if they're there, they're good. Email webinars at Areopa Academy. So that's it. We're about to finish. I will stop the recording in a few moments. And thanks, everybody. And great presentation, Luc. It really brings to light how much BC is different to Navision, and how the sale philosophy, the development philosophy, that whole life cycle of recurring software is a complete new world to us. And I think nothing shows it better than what you just said now. So fabulous.
You're welcome. Okay. Thanks for being here also.
Thank you. You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.